Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a recent reads wrap up. I'm here to talk about 10 books that I recently read, and I'll have content warnings in the description box down below in case that is something that you need. But without further ado, let's get right down to the books that I have recently read. The first book I want to talk to you about is actually a reread. I've read this before, and that is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. And I've always said that this is my favourite Jane Austen book, but rereading it solidified that for me, and it's definitely put it there as permanently in the top spot. So if you don't know what Sense and Sensibility is about, it's about these two sisters, Marianne and Eleanor, and it's about their journey to finding love and the mishaps that they have along the way. One of them is a very sensible kind of person who holds her emotions at bay and very much takes charge of the family unit. And then you've also got Marianne, who's more emotional, who's more prone to whimsy and idealism, and it's about how they contrast each other but how they also support each other as sisters. So I reread this one as part of my episode for the Austen podcast, so thank you very much for having me on. And it was just so interesting to reread this one as somebody who is older. The reason why I loved this one in the beginning is because I loved the sister relationship and I really related to Eleanor as a main character. But rereading it more and more, I realised how much I still relate to Eleanor as a main character, but things that I didn't see in terms of the love interest portrayals and who is actually a good love interest, and the way that they all treat Eleanor and rely on her so much, and that responsibility that she has to carry on her shoulders all the time. It's so unfair the way that they treat her. Even Marianne at times really lets her down as a sibling who supposedly loves and supports her. So it's just very interesting to read something that I'm already so familiar with, but to see it from an entirely different perspective, and to have such fresh takes on not only the men who are portrayed as potential love interests, but also the men who treat Eleanor as a friend and how they sometimes misuse that friendship as well. It was absolutely fascinating, and I had the best time discussing on the podcast and picking apart threads that I didn't even know I was thinking about in my mind. So I'm going to leave a link to that episode down below if it has already aired by the time I get around to posting this. It's absolutely fantastic and peak Jane Austen, and I know loads of people love Pride and Prejudice more, but I'm saying this is actually where the quality is at. So switching genre, I read Godkiller by Hannah Kana. So we're living in this fantasy world where gods exist and they're kind of worshipped and they have power. And Kisen, who is our main character, has seen her family murdered by a god, and since then she's become a god killer who avenges people who've been wronged by gods and just kills them willy-nilly. And as well as that, you meet some other characters, Elogast, who is scarred from the war of what happened with gods, and also this young little girl who has a small god of white lies that seems intrinsically tied to her, and she's trying to sever that tie. And when all of these characters come together, one who is scarred by a god, one who is a god killer, and one who has a god attached to them but cannot get rid of the god, a lot of things go down. And that's essentially how I would describe this plot. I actually find it quite difficult to describe, but when I started reading this, I was pleasantly surprised because I did not expect this one to have as much disability representation in it as it does. So one of the things to note for the disability representation is that Kisen, our main character, uses a prosthetic limb due to things that have happened to her in the past, which I'll let you discover yourself, and that representation is all through the novel. But also there's a secondary character who is deaf, and so a lot of these characters know sign language because they are interacting with the secondary character, and that representation is on the page too. And it's all normalized and tied into this fantasy world, and I love it. I don't think we get to see as much representation of disability in fantasy worlds. When I get it, I just eat it up, and I'm so excited to see it. And not only that, but this story was actually genuinely a very good one. In some ways, it's your typical fantasy plot. They need to go on a trip and travel and journey across this world filled with monsters so that they can get to this god that they need to kill, and things are going to go down on the way and when they get there. It's generally a fantasy journey I know very well, but the disability spin on it adds a layer, and also the characters in this really stole my heart. They are so rough around the edges. That's the best way I can describe it. We've got this young child who's quite naive, and then this man who is really tortured by his past but is doing his best to be better. And Kisen is just blunt. She is a blunt, rough-edged woman who does whatever she wants, and I really admired her for that. She's also bisexual, and you get to see that representation on the page, and I just loved how they were all very, very different from each other, but they all kind of formed a found family unit and had to learn how to trust each other. You get everybody's point of view, so you're switching between them, and you even get Skedi, the small god who's tied to the little girl's point of view as well. And again, I really liked seeing how the Godkiller and Skedi interacted, and those were some of my favourite parts as well. I was satisfied by the plot and where it went in the end and the directions that it took, and the romance in this is quite slow burn, which is definitely my preference. It's one of those ones where there's not too much steam on the page at all. It mostly is fade to black, so you get the warm-up towards where everything's heading and then it fades to black. But it is such a good slow burn and really cements like friendship and trust before getting to the relationship part of it, which is something I always really like to see. The way that this ended, I have a feeling the second book is going to be very, very good and just another really good time. So I'm looking forward to reading Songbringer at some point. But yes, this book ended up being the pleasant surprise that I didn't expect when I picked it up. I also read Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. I am working my way through her books, and this one is one of those books that I read incredibly slowly. I don't think you can read it fast, and I don't think I'm going to be able to explain the plot of this book very well because it's a very meandering, but it is still unified and wholesome, if that makes any sense. So in this one you're following a family, and primarily you're following Milkman in this family. He is the son amongst a group of sisters, and his dad is very strict, his mum is very strange, and his best friend, who's called Guitar, ends up tangled in some unsavory business. And it's about how his perception of his friend changes, but also what it means for him, because it might end up with them being in conflict with each other. Saying that though, I don't think it summarizes the plot of this book at all. That's just what the back tells you. But really what this book feels like is a family saga where you gradually get to hear everyone's story, and it accumulates to explain why Milkman is the way he is and why the choices that the characters are making is so impactful. I don't know how to describe it, but if you've read a Toni Morrison, you know exactly what I'm getting at, because Toni Morrison's writing style is absolutely masterful. She will take you through scenes and moments in a way where it guides you through and it waves you through them, and you don't even notice that you've switched point of view, or you don't even notice that you're getting somebody else's story until you're halfway in it. That's how smoothly the narrative progresses when she is writing. And so in this one it is about Milkman, yes, but you get to understand why his dad is the way that he is and why his dad makes the choices that he does, and you see how it impacts the wife, but then you'll get the wife's point of view and how she is in this marriage and why she is there and what she is doing. And then since you've got both perspectives, it's a toss-up for whose side you're on or how you feel about what they've done. And Toni Morrison masterfully does that in so many different instances where you get to see like aunts and cousins and all of the sisters' point of view. And even though this one is very much focused and centered on narratively the men and the choices the men are making, what really struck me were the women's point of views and the women's stories, and how racism in this world forced women into the choices that they made, forced women into becoming the way that they become by the end of this book. And so I just felt like I had gone on a significant journey, even though this book is, let me tell you, it's about 400 pages long. It felt like a 600-page book, not in that it was so slow and boring, but because so much happened within those 400 pages, and each page was necessary. Each description was necessary for you to understand the conclusion of the book. And there is metaphor woven into this, but in a very discreet way, where you don't understand you are being fed metaphor until you get to the end of the book and you're like, do I understand the ending? Because it's one that you need to think about and process. So I think this book was really good and it was really amazing, but I've not given it 5 stars yet. I think this is the kind of book where I need to sit on it and I need to dwell on it and I need to think about it, and it might end up in my best books of the year, and I'll probably reread it and notice a lot more things that I just could not catch the first time because there is so much in there. So that's all I can tell you about Song of Solomon. I feel like I've been very vague, but it is a brilliant book. The next book I want to talk about is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is a very well-known nature book by an Indigenous author, and she's talking about Indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants while also talking about Indigenous culture. This book is really, really important, and I am so glad I read it, even though it ended up being a middle of the road read for me. And I do have to talk about my history with nature reading. So I don't really read nature writing books, and I've tried many times. I've DNF'd them many times, and when I do, I don't really mention it on my channel because I don't think it's fair to the book. I really struggle to read about nature because I am someone, when it comes to nature, I love being out there. I love to hike. I love to be amongst the plants and the woods and the green spaces, which sounds very weird for someone who lives in London, but I was not raised here. And when it comes to learning about nature, especially my environmental sciences classes I took in school, you always learn about it out in nature. You go out in nature and you learn about it, and you learn the science and you learn everything that's in this book, but you do it while you are there in nature. And so whenever I read about nature in a scientific way, I just check out mentally because I just can't compute why I should be reading about it when I should go to that place and learn about it there. And I know that writing about it then means for all those people who can't travel, who can't go to these places to see these things firsthand, you get to learn about them, and that's sharing wisdom. But for me, I really struggle to get into the book because it just is not how I learn nature. So that is the kind of reason why this book was a middle of the road read, but I'm here to tell you the reasons why you should still read it anyway, and that's because it is so very well written. I loved the way that she talked about Indigenous culture and Indigenous science, and I learned about the ways in which there's been so much racism and pushback against these scientists that have worked for years and years and years, but modern day has told us they don't work anymore, and modern day people have ignored the Indigenous wisdom that is really just out there for us to grasp. I loved hearing about her history in particular, but also the ways in which there are people out there trying to preserve Indigenous history and what we can do to support it. What fascinated me most, a lot of this has to do about plants and nature, but she's talking about gift economy versus capitalism. And as someone who has been thinking about her journey with capitalism and hoarding and, you know, all of that stuff lately, especially in terms of books and counting my books, it was just really interesting to learn more about the gift economy and how to fight that kind of commercial nature of needing to own everything and everything and everything. I think each book that I read about that helps me, and although that's not the main point of this book, that's definitely something that I took away from it. She also talks about what it's like to be a mother and how that ties into her studies of nature quite a bit, and I really love books about motherhood, and I think that strand was very well woven in here, but also didn't make it seem like mothers and nature have to go hand in hand, or that if you're not a mother you can't relate to nature, if that makes sense. So I was really impressed with this, and I thought it was really, really good, but at the same time, at its core, it's not actually a book for me. I read Maame by Jessica George. This is a Black literary fiction book where you're following Maame. She has been a carer for her dad for a very long time, and she is just on the brink of moving out and starting her own life when things seem to start to go wrong, and she ends up spiraling into grief and not sure what she's doing with her life. She's been given this newfound freedom and she doesn't know how to handle it. The back of this book makes it seem like you're going to get what it's like to be a Black carer, and as a Black carer, I was really looking forward to reading about that experience. That is not what this book is at all. It is a coming of age story, and I had a middle of the road experience with this. I really liked the second half, but the first half left me wanting a lot. I think some of it had to do with needing to readjust my expectations, but I also think quite a bit of my frustration at the beginning had to do with the fact that this book is very much tell over show. The writing style is just telling you everything that she's doing, telling you everything that she's feeling, and it tells you why what happened is racist, or what happened is unfair, or what happened is classist. It really just shouts those things at you, so it didn't feel like it blended well into the narrative, and I was like, oh, I'm fed up of this. I've also fed up of the young Black woman falls for an older white guy, and that doesn't work out because the older white guy is fetishizing her. Like, I just have read so much of that in Luster, in so many other Black literary books that people are praising these days, and it's just like, I really don't know that many young black people who have fallen for much older white guys who misuse them. So I was just really fed up with having seen that story again. I just feel like with black literature we're falling into a lot of the same patterns and stereotypes, and I want us to move on. But the second half of this book was quite redeeming in the fact that it focused more on grief and also on the family relationships and how complicated they were. And I think it did that depiction of grief very, very well, especially grief that is particular to who has passed away in the book, which I won't spoil, but I think this did it very truthfully and it made me quite emotional, and I could see where the character's choices were coming from. And also the character does not have a straightforward family. There's a lot of, if something's wrong in the family, hush it up, and she also needs to learn more about her culture and where she comes from, and seeing that represented in this book was done really, really well. So it was a shame for me that the first half wasn't something I enjoyed and then the second half was something that I really enjoyed. It was almost like the author was warming up as she continued to write more and more. I'd be curious to see what Jessica George writes next, but I don't know if I can really recommend this one. I think some people are going to like it and some people aren't, and you just got to try it and find out for yourself. Another book that ended up kind of being a middle of the road read for me was Greenwild by Pari Thomson. This is a middle grade book to do with plants and plant magic, and so we've got our main character. She is Iranian, I believe, and she travels with her mother around as her mother studies the climate and all things environmental. But when her mother goes missing in a forest, she gets sent to this school, and through a series of events she discovers that she can enter this new world where plant magic exists, and actually her mum is from there, and maybe she is able to wield this magic or not, and will she be able to find her mother, because people have been disappearing into these woods for a very long time. I enjoyed this. This was really fun to read. It kind of reminded me of Hedge Witch, another middle grade book I read last year, and it's a lot of fun. I think children are really going to enjoy reading this one. I liked how it tied into the environmental elements and climate change and why we need to care about our environment a lot. I really think that was really nice. It had the green nature feel to it all the way through, and our main character is someone who's just so determined to do the right thing even when people aren't listening to her, or she may have to break a few rules in order to be able to do so. And I liked how gutsy she was. There were some really nice friendships here as well, but ultimately for me as an adult reading this, I just felt like this was a run-of-the-mill middle grade fantasy book, and I just need something more for my middle grade to stand out to me. I am aware that I'm an adult reader saying this, so it's one that I recommend to children and those who are of this age and parents to read with children, but for me personally I just don't think it fits into what I'm looking for as an adult reader who's reading middle grade. The next book I was really anticipating reading because I have read everything else that she's written, and this is her latest release, and that is the Takedown by Lily Chu. So in this book we are following our main character, and she is a diversity consultant. She's recently made redundant, so she tries to get a new job, and this new job is very testing in the fact that they seem to be the opposite of everything diverse. They're mostly men in this fashion industry, it's mostly white people, and it's about how she's trying to change that work culture from the inside out. But at the same time she also plays this game that's very interactive and outdoors, and on the leaderboard she's just under this guy who she texts and competes with online, and when they meet in real life they kind of have a meet cute and they start dating. And then when she goes to be a diversity consultant for this new company, turns out he is the son's CEO of the company and works there, and that's the setup and situation for this book. Now I have read Lily Chu before, and mostly they tend to be heavy on the rom-com side of things, but then also tackles a very important subject. So I went into this thinking I was going to get mostly a rom-com with a side dish of tackling a very important subject. I got the reverse. This is mostly a book talking about work culture, diversity, and tackling racism within your workplace, with a dash of romance on the side. And so if you go in with that expectation, I think you're going to enjoy this one even more than I did, because in the beginning I was just thinking their romance is going too smoothly. They are such a cute couple, they learn how to communicate, and they really just want the best for each other, and their dates that they have throughout this is so sweet, and he is so lovely as a love interest, even though he has his flaws and things that he's working through, and she as well, she does. But mostly their romance is smooth sailing throughout this book. They have one or two hiccups, but they know what they're doing, and it's really sweet and genuine. So the tension and the drama does not lie in the romance, it really lies in the workplace culture, which honestly, it was shocking. It had me gasping, and I do like how it touched on diversity, but really touched on all the different parts of it. So it's not just about her as someone who is Chinese Canadian dealing with the racism that she faces, but there's also a black diversity consultant that she's working with, and she realizes that she has not been noticing some of the racism that her colleague has been facing. So she also has to own up to some of the things that happen in this book, and I really like that. There's also some side storylines where she struggles with toxic positivity quite a lot, and that was the part that dragged this story down for me, because I could not believe her naivety with mindfulness and toxic positivity and manifestation. It may be because of the fact that I just really don't believe in manifesting things in the universe and then they come your way. So maybe it was just me not being able to remove my own beliefs and put them in what she was thinking. But the way that she leant so hard on the toxic positivity and couldn't see how toxic it was just made me like, you are a middle-aged woman, like how do you not recognize how toxic this is? So that frustrated me a bit, but otherwise I had a very good time with this. I continue to enjoy Lily Chu's writing, and while in the ranking of her 3 books it's my least favourite, I do still think it's a very good book. You just have to go into it with slightly different expectations than you might have had with her previous 2 books if you've read her work before. This is also a good time for me to mention that within this time period I read Spirits Abroad by Zen Cho. However, this is going to be a Patreon exclusive wrap up, so I'm not going to share my thoughts on this book in particular here. Every now and again I wrap things up exclusively for my Patreons, which mostly has to do with whether or not I'm working on a book or if I just want to create a Patreon exclusive wrap up. So this is a great moment to say thank you to all of my Patrons who have subscribed and who support me over there, and whatever tier you're at, you do get to have this exclusive wrap-up. So if you want my thoughts on Spirits Abroad, you can find them over on my Patreon. I also read Dreadful by Rozakis, and this one absolutely surprised me. If you told me that comedic fantasy book is going to be the book for me, I would have said absolutely not, you're not right. However, this was in a goodie bag for an event that I went to, and I read it and I had such a good time. It honestly pleasantly surprised me. So in this one you've got a person who wakes up in this lab which is in complete chaos. It's a magical lab and everything is going wrong, and all of these goblins and everybody is answering to him, and he suddenly realizes that he is the villain. He is the villain in this story. He cannot remember anything. He has full out amnesia. He doesn't remember how to use his magic. He doesn't remember what things he's done and why he's got a princess locked up in the dungeon. And the more that he pretends as if he knows who he is, he discovers that this villain has gotten in over his head and needs to reckon with the fact that this villain is him. And it is a delightful book. I ended up laughing while reading this one. I ended up smiling because it is comedic. There's a lot of situational humour, which works very well because it's not on the nose at all. The humour is in the situations that he ends up in. And I also really liked the world building, which is done very carefully and just very well done in a way that you understand the world, you understand how everything works, but you slowly understand it as he starts to remember how things work and what he's done in the past as well. And while this is a silly, funny fantasy book with magic and a villain who doesn't know what he's doing and what on earth is going on at any point in time, it's also a book that really heavily discusses and focuses on what does it mean if you want to do better? Can you be forgiven for all the wrongs you've done? Or do you reach a point where you've done too many wrongs that you cannot be forgiven? What happens if you do want to change who you are? How can you right the wrongs of the past when they are over and done with? And I appreciated how much it dwelled on that and how it took that subject matter seriously in the midst of all the situational funny humour. And it managed to achieve what I think was a very good outcome, and I really liked the lessons that the main character had to learn throughout this. As well as that, if you kind of like a man who realizes he's done everything wrong and wants to apologize and slowly learns the ways in which he's been sexist and tries to change, you're going to appreciate this book, because he realizes that he is not a very good person and he sometimes has those immediate emotional reactions that he needs to learn to face and fight against. And I really liked seeing him kind of own his wrongs and learn how to do better. It was a really funny book. It was really delightful. This is the by Broken Binding special edition, but this is what the finished cover looks like if you want to be able to recognize it in a bookshop, and I highly recommend it. I need good, funny, comedic fantasy recommendations after having read this. And I also read Super Ghost by Greg, James and Chris Smith. This is a middle grade, seriously funny book. I read The Great Dream Robbery by them when that came out, and so when I saw this one in a shop for a very cheap price, I just had to snag it and pick it up, and I had a very, very good time with it. The title kind of gives you what the plot is. So in this world, a supervillain exists and a superhero exists, and they are kind of eternally fighting with robots involved, and then they both end up dead, and instead they become super ghosts. And it's about this one last villain who is trying to do some evil plan that involves robot pandas, and the superhero ghost who is going to kind of help the characters in this one, the children, fight against it. He's a ghost, only one child can see the ghost, and it's about trying to get adults to believe that there is something happening, that the ghost is real, and that there is a crisis that needs facing. This is the kind of book where I say you have to read it in two formats. You're going to want the physical edition because there are illustrations in this, and the authors kind of play around with the font size when they're shouting something or when they're singing something. So you're gonna want to have the physical edition so you can see that visually on the page, but you're also going to want to listen with the audiobook, because once again the authors narrate it and they do such a good job with the funny sounds and the funny voices, and they bring the story to life. So you're going to want to listen to it while you read along. Parents and teachers and guardians, that's what I really recommend doing for this. And it's so entertaining. It's funny, it's silly, it's a story that boys and girls can equally appreciate, which I know is something people are struggling to find in middle grade right now. So it manages to do all of those. If your child is interested in superheroes, they're going to really enjoy the superhero supervillain thing. There's some silly panda robots who are taking over the world, and it's fantastic and entertaining. But as well as that, underneath all of the silly, flamboyant, creative drama that these characters get up to, there's also a very important message of the fact that anybody can be a hero and anybody can stand up, do the right thing, and make a choice to do the right thing and to fight for what's right. And I like how, even though it's a silly, entertaining story, it managed to have a important moral message at its core as well, and balance that element into it. Really, such a delight. This was the funny, entertaining, but serious at the same time middle grade I was looking for when I picked this up. And last but not least, of course, I did read one Sierra Simone book, which I have to talk about here. It's actually a short story, and it's called Beg Me, and this one fits into the Lioness trilogy world, which starts with Salt Kiss. So you are going to want to have read at least Salt Kiss before you get to this book. It's a free ebook that you can download on her website, so definitely go and find it if you would like to read it. And in this one, it's following Mark and Tristan, and it's set in a club, and they go and be voyeurs to some steamy stuff that's happening within a room. They're invited to look at it, and then after that they have their own particular steamy moment in which Tristan learns something new about himself, and Mark also kind of reiterates the consequences of what happens at the end of Salt Kiss. So the reason why I've been loving this series so much is because I've been anticipating the second book in the series, and it ended on a cliffhanger, and Sierra Simone has reiterated that cliffhanger with the prequel, Salt in the Wound, and once again she reiterates that cliffhanger in this short story and the consequences that that cliffhanger will have. So she's basically teasing us to the literal brink, and I'm losing my mind at how far she has pushed us with this teasing. So I just need to get my hands on Honeycutt very, very soon. But it was another fantastic short story. The steamy scene was so steamy all the way through, from the first part where they are voyeurs to whatever they end up doing after that, and it was it was really hot to read. And so I gave this book 5 stars because not only does it offer you character development in a short story because Tristan learns something new about the way that he desires things, but it also gave us a very good steamy scene and reiterated the cliffhanger all in a short number of pages. You have to be so skilled to be able to pull that off, but Sierra Simone has those skills and she does it fantastically. And so there you have it. Those are my thoughts on 10 of the books that I have recently read. Please let me know in the comments section down below what was the last book that you recently read and took you pleasantly by surprise. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!